All right. Hey, welcome everybody. It is 7 o'clock Wednesday night. Sci-Fi Distill. We are
Hi
into
guys.
November. We finished up Halloween last week. Welcome back, Bruce,
Hi
and of course,
Bill.
welcome Mary Beth. So this week we are
Hello,
doing
hello.
the Apple Plus TV show for all mankind. It is going into
What
its
a
fourth
great
season
show.
starting Friday. Um, so so we're going to do a review seasons 1, 2, and 3. If you haven't seen this
Okay.
series yet, there will be spoilers, just so you know. So if you haven't seen it, maybe you want to watch this afterwards. But it is really good. It's worth paying even a month of Apple Plus just to watch this one show. But there's other good stuff. Apple does have some really good stuff because there's Silo for sci-fi. There's Silo
Yeah.
on there, which is really good. And there is Foundation, which isn't bad. There's 2 seasons of that. So there's
Foundation
other stuff
is
to watch.
Apple, I think. Yeah.
Yep. So, all right. So, but before we do that, I
Yeah,
assume we
it's
have
quite good.
news.
We do have news. Let me attempt to fly through the news because I want to get to For All Mankind. Before the news, let me actually just show you guys super fast because I think look at this adorable tiny little teeny tiny little sci-fi distill shirt featuring the Jeff Rubel design on the back. My nephew's name, Max. That's going to him for Christmas, and I think it's adorable. Moving on. If there's another sale for that stuff, guys, we'll let you know. I'm sure there will be
Yeah,
before Christmas.
I'm
In
sure there will
my
be.
very yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. In my very sporadic series, I watched it so you don't have to. I watched the adult animated series Scavenger's Reign so you don't have to. And my review is you might want to. If your pet peeve about Strange New Worlds or sci-fi in general is that nothing is ever truly different or strange or new, watch Scavenger's Reign. It kind of reminded me of that. Do you remember that French movie from 1973, Fantastic Planet or Planète Sauvage or whatever it was called? Only it's even weirder. The writers and the creators have made a true new planet with a new ecosystem and new flora and new fauna, and it all is symbiotic and kind of works together, and it's weird and hard to understand and just absolutely bizarre. It is about human survival and focuses on humanity in truly bizarre circumstances. It has my recommendation. You might want to check it out. Back to stuff we know and love. With the writers' strike over Ronald Moore, who we will be discussing tonight because he did this show too. Ronald Moore and Sam Esmail are back at work on a continuation, not a reboot, a continuation of the Battlestar Galactica TV series. Interestingly, there is also a movie in the works by Universal, and while a few script drafts, have been greenlit, they are still looking for a director. Of those two projects, my money's on Ronald Moore and getting the TV show going. Also, with the writer's strike over, there is a new Blade film in the works for the MCU, looking to be the second R-rated MCU film after Deadpool. This project also has been plagued by rewrites and production issues, so don't look for it until 2025 or after. But they did go ahead and make the official announcement. Speaking of strikes, let's look at what the kids over at SAG-AFTRA are doing. Still nothing. They cannot come to terms with the studios, and they will not budge because the studios are pushing for unfettered access to and ownership of their likenesses in perpetuity. I'd fight back too. The recent proposal would have allowed the studios to use scans of the actors, even dead actors, without consent of them, their state, or the guild. SAG-AFTRA wants the studios to pay the actors, well, they should, each time their likeness is used and to get consent before using it. This is not just to protect the big stars and the leads, but also to protect the background actors who get scanned and then digitally tinkered with. Actually, they get tinkered with the most. SAG-AFTRA says it is increasingly clear that their best interests are not being prioritized by the studios, especially when it comes to how their faces will be used to sell products. So as 2023 comes to a close, what do we have to look forward to in 2024? Well, I have a huge list of stuff in both the theaters and on TV, so strap in. Here we go. In the theaters in 2024, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. Argyle, a spy action comedy, which kind of looks funny. Night Swim, horror, looks boring. The Fall Guy, I wish it was cool like the actual Fall Guy, but no, it's an Emily Blunt, Ryan Gosling action comedy romance. Elio, Pixar, little kid gets abducted by aliens and apparently hilarity ensues. I'm not sure. Craven the Hunter, a fantasy movie about someone in Africa hunting the animals and then taking on their attributes, which is kind of interesting. Lisa Frankenstein reminded me very, very much of, if you guys saw Warm Bodies, which was a zombie rom-com, this is a monster rom-com, so it's a mon rom-com. Dune 2, of course, Godzilla and Kong, the New Empire, and gotta love this one, The Beekeeper. Yes, The Beekeeper, a Jason Statham action movie, which is a very typical action movie where like he used to be this badass agent, but now he's retired and put it around. But then someone kills his wife, kills his husband, kills his kid, takes his dog, I don't know, whatever, and suddenly has to be a badass again. This is it, except Jason Statham was a beekeeper. Yes, this is real, kids. Netflix. What's on TV, you ask? I will tell you. Netflix is holding its third annual Geek Week, November 6th through 12th, so right now. They are showcasing all the cool, geeky sci-fi and fantasy shows that we have to look forward to. And on the list is The Three Body Problem. I really want to see that. Avatar, The Last Airbender, the show, not the movie. The Brother's Son, Damsel, that looks cool. Devil May Cry, Leave the World Behind, Rebel Moon, we've discussed that on this show. Umbrella Academy, Scott Pilgrim Takes Off, and more. November 6th was Stranger Things Day, so we missed that. Clips and teasers will start tomorrow, and special online events such as interviews and behind-the-scenes stuff will run through the weekend. Go to netflix.com to check it all out. I specifically mentioned Stranger Things because set to open in London, England on December 14th is Stranger Things The Shadow. This is a stage play that fills in some of the gaps before season 5. Think of it in terms of like Harry Potter and the Cursed Child when they did a Harry Potter stage play. It's going to look at Henry Creel's backstory. Now, you're probably thinking this is just a cash grab by the Duffer Brothers, and you may be right. But at this point, with the strikes going on, the original cast will be in their 40s by the time they get to film season 5, and early reviews of this thing are quite good. If it proves popular, they'll film it and run it on Netflix the way they did Hamilton. Moving on to other upcoming things. If you enjoyed Silo, which I did, you might enjoy Beacon 23. Beacon 23 and Silo get a lot of comparisons because they are both written by Hugh Howey. The series, Beacon 23, follows a space lighthouse because Howey apparently has a thing for cylindrical buildings. Silo being a cylinder underground and Beacon 23 being a cylinder in space. It talks about the various keepers who have lived there over the years. It's an anthology kind of flashback series. Every show is a bottle show because they're in the same lighthouse. The first episode focuses on government agent Aster, played by Lena Headey. You know her best as Cersei Lannister from Game of Thrones. As her story weaves in and out of the other stories, it builds to a huge secret. And finally, tonight, I have 2 pieces of Star Trek news for you. Piece of Star Trek news number 1. Yesterday, November 7th, Paramount Home Entertainment released a limited edition Star Trek The Picard Legacy Collection. This is a 54, count 'em kids, 54 disc Blu-ray collection, and it houses every season film that features the character Jean-Luc Picard. So we got Next Gen, all seasons 1 through 7. Star Trek Picard, seasons 1 through 3, Generations, First Contact, Nemesis, Insurrection, plus 35 hours of bonus features and behind-the-scenes stuff to watch. Plus, but wait, there's more. This set also includes an exclusive edition of The Wisdom of Picard, I believe that's the book, which has brand new artwork. It has quotes from the last season of Star Trek Picard. It has the playing cards, so you can do your own poker setup. And it has 4 Chateau Picard drink coasters. So when you drink your drink, you got somewhere to put it. And it has a magnet sheet that features all of Picard's badges. You can slap them all over your fridge. This collection is available for pre-order now on Amazon and Walmart for $199.95 or at Best Buy for $229.99. I don't know why there's a price discrepancy, but I will let you guys know when it will actually physically be in stores. And Star Trek news number 2, Lower Decks creator Mike McMahon has discussed his desire to see the series expand into feature films. I have an idea for an animated Lower Deck movie. I have an idea for a live action Lower Deck movie. And I have ideas for brand new, totally original Star Trek movies that don't tie into anything we've seen before. The man clearly wants to make Star Trek content, and I say we let him. He just wants to put it out there. And, what he's saying is that he wants to do stuff that's all different crews, not the same crew over and over, but all different crews, and sometimes suspense and sometimes drama, but maybe also sometimes comedy. He just wants to put out Star Trek content, and I am there for it. Speaking of his Lower Decks, what is going to happen now is Rizzo is going to put up a timer, and we are going to discuss. Yeah, we are going to discuss. Is that the 199 is 246 in Canada? Is that what you're saying, Bruce?
Damn straight. Got to put the Canadian price up there.
We are going to look at the finale of Lower Decks. Yeah.
All right, there you go. So it was the finale. Over. Done. My end of. That's it. We didn't need 3 minutes. No, I mean it was a two-parter. Really, it was a 2-part ending because we kind of left episode 9 left us in a cliffhanger, sort of, to go and left episode 10. It's basically the overall story as we find out what the mystery ship that was. Well, we found out at one point they weren't destroying these ships; they were stealing them, and there was a lot of weird levels of I don't want to call it Easter eggs, but throwbacks to TNG. We had Well, we had Will Wheaton come back as
a lot of callbacks, and we had a little cameo from some people.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So basically the overall thing is that Locarno, the guy that was the head of Nova Squadron, remember that episode where they did the starburst or whatever it was? They tried to do it, and it went bad, and somebody died, and then he got drummed out of Starfleet as a result of it. So now he's back. Basically, he has convinced Lower Deck people on other ships to have mutiny on their own ship, and then he steals them with that, I guess, giant ship transporter thing. They never really explained what it was. So he's created his own fleet, and then of course the Cerritos has to go and get him. That's kind of the gist of it overall. There's a lot more, but I don't want to take the whole 3 minutes. So I mean,
it was brilliant. Fantastic conclusion.
Well, he kidnapped Mariner. That's why they went after her.
Right, and the key is we find out why Mariner is the way she is.
Yep.
Why she went from really eager Starfleet cadet to being kind of a misfit and wanting to always stay as an ensign, because she idolized the one character that was from TNG that died, the Bajoran cadet member or ensign. Picard sent her on a mission and she didn't make it back. So that triggered, but Mariner apparently idolized her, and her death threw her opposite. I don't want to ever be more than a lower decker, even though we know she's much more confident in that. So anyway, we got 30 seconds. Anybody got other thoughts?
It was brilliant. I love the fact that they brought back all these actors.
It was great to hear.
Actually do that, because the Ceto Jax, who was the Betazoid, the Bajoran, she was only on 2 episodes and hasn't really acted since then. They brought her back for the cameo when they do a flashback to Nova Squadron. Great. Yeah. I love the comments that Robert Duncan McNeil played Tom Paris and Nick Lucano, and they make a couple of comments there. Doesn't he look just like him. Tom Paris?
I don't see it.
All right. So the other, they did do that with Whitney and Nass too. They brought her back, Sonia Gomez, so that she was only on 2 episodes. So clearly they've established that that's a thing. So I assume we'll get another season of that, and we'll look forward to it. So that will
they have been greenlit for another season.
So anyway, I do have a drink for tonight. This one is called the Full
What
Moon
are we drinking up in Jamestown?
So this is
nice.
It's pretty simple. It's basically coconut cream and water and vodka. I mean, that's a basic. The instructions are there. You got to make an ice cube of the coconut cream and water, and then you just add vodka, throw it in a thing with vodka with some blackberries. It's pretty simple. But anyway, full moon, figured it fits tonight's show. So, so the basic premise
Hi,
of
Bill.
Florida Man
Jeff. Hi,
is
Chris.
the
Hi, Alex.
is that we start right with the lunar landing, or really Apollo 10, where they just orbited in the lunar lander but never landed. And of course, we see the astronaut. Now, this is there are characters that were actually a lot. The weird thing about this show is they take people that were real life people from that era, and then they added others that were clearly based on people that were alive in that era. Gordo Cooper, for one, was very similar, but they still had like Gene Cernan and all some of those other guys. But so the initial episode, the first episode, is them doing the Apollo 10 orbit in the lunar lander. And of course, the one main character wants to land because he's like, I can see it. All I got to do is do it. And they knew the Russians were right on their heels. Of course, in reality, the Russians weren't anywhere near landing on the moon compared to us. So there really wasn't much reality there. But what happens is between Apollo 10 and Apollo 11, the Russians do land, and they are the first men on the moon, so to speak. So what that causes is the space race to just continue for decades rather than pretty much fizzling out in the mid 70s, which is what actually happened, because once we got to the moon, the Russians pretty much gave up their race to it because there wasn't much point at that level. So anyway, so initially when I saw the trailer for this movie and heard about this show, I was a little skeptical. I'm like, it's that alternate history. I wasn't sure. The one thing that I know bugged me, and I don't know about you guys, can weigh in on this. When I saw that first episode and you see the Russians land first and the communist flag go up, it bothered me. It was like there was like a weird, like, no, that's not right. It shouldn't. That's just totally wrong. So, but the show definitely that's just the spark that starts it. It's not what the show is totally about, and it becomes our race to the moon, and then we, of course, try to establish a moon base before them, and it goes on. The cool thing about each season is it's a different era of NASA. So the initial one is the moon landing era, so it's like the late 60s to early 70s. Then the next one, we're in the 80s. We're in the shuttle era, so we're already doing orbiting, and we've got things, but we still have our base. Now we have Jamestown, which is what our little moon base is becoming, which is getting. And then, of course, the next season is the race to Mars. And it's not just a race between the Americans and the Russians. It's the Americans, the Russians. I think the Chinese might be in there somewhere. The Koreans and independent, commercial operators. So that is the basic nutshell. Did I miss anything of the show? Of course, there's tons of
drama
characters.
And the stakes.
Yeah,
the stakes are really high.
Right. The character development in this show is so good, though. They really do a good job of fleshing out these characters. They're not two-dimensional at all. You find out a lot of them dealing with stuff at home and stuff, which doesn't normally. I'm like, oh, is that relevant? But they make it relevant.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I think is very key. Is like a lot of times you'll see these backstories on people, and it's like, well, that has really nothing to do with the main storyline. Like what's going on in their personal life shouldn't make, but this one, it really does. It integrates some of the cool things, as like the Russians immediately had women in orbit and in space and as cosmonauts. Of course, the Americans didn't, but it kind of did drive in this show because of that. They kind of made the Americans force them to kind of, again, they were always keeping up with the Joneses sort of thing, is what the Russians were doing. So things do come to a head on the moon. I don't want to get too much into details. Of course, with the Russians and the Americans.
Oh, I want to get into detail. I want to talk about the whole
Jamestown
crisis.
Initially. So that's the first season is the whole Jamestown, right? That's where we end, if I remember right.
Still first season? When Gordo and Tracy had to go outside.
No, that was second season. That was the second season. I want to
talk about that.
When they got onto Jamestown is when they were stuck up there. Remember, they couldn't get them because of the.
Oh, hi Bob. That's why we're all Bob.
Oh, hi Bob thing. Right. So the joke was, why were me and Mary Beth are both Bob? Is these three astronauts are stuck in Jamestown, which is a very small module that they landed on the moon for them to live in a habitat. So it's not hugely, it's not a very palatial, and they're stuck up there for an inordinate amount of time because of delays with building spacecraft and whatever things that are going on, and they just can't get back there to get these guys. And it's not about, they had enough food and water apparently, but they were going crazy because they only had like 4 episodes of Bob Newhart Entertainment on VHS or something, or some kind of tape. So they got
they were pumping up Bob Newhart to them.
Well, they started reenacting the episodes themselves
because they knew them by heart. Absolutely,
they knew them so well. So the joke became, they saw one.
They knew them by heart, yeah. But then Gordo kind of started going a little.
Kind of started to space happy.
Yeah, I mean they've been up there 3 months, so yeah, that was
so, a gist. Yeah, and that's when he was like, making them do it. Say hi, Bob, and then you say this, yeah.
Yeah. So the one character does start to kind of go space happy, and there was an incident, right? Because he was going to try to go outside or something, I think, and they covered for him, right? If I remember, he was going to
seen those red lights. Do you remember he saw those red lights off in the distance? And they have yet, unless I missed something. Did I miss something? They never explained those. Was he actually seeing real lights, or was he hallucinating?
I think they just assumed he was hallucinating.
See, I thought it was another thing like the Koreans. Because once I saw the North Koreans on Mars,
it could have been. But the Russians were up there too, so it could have been them doing something. Obviously, that.
Oh yeah, it's been the Russians. Yes.
To the next, in the second season, Jamestown gets bigger. They add modules to it. There's a lot more people up there, and then the Russians have their facility, and then there's this race for water, for mining on the moon for water and other things. So I think it was water,
helium or some other gas too. Water. Molly, because Molly is the one who goes down. Remember, she's like, just another minute, and she's chipping out. And she gets the
it might have been, but whatever. There's something else, some mineral or something that they wanted, and of course tensions are high. It's almost like Bay of Pigs type Cuban Missile Crisis thing going on the moon.
But it's
the Russians basically took over their mining facility.
But the ability of the show to go big and small, and you care about both, is incredible, because you've got all that tension with the Russians and the Americans, plus the fact you've got Gordo, a perfect thing, going for the walk, and the ant farm had been knocked over in the habitat, and all of a sudden he starts hallucinating ants in his spacesuit. And if you can imagine, you can't get at them. There's no way you can take a spacesuit off. If you have a whole colony of ants in there, holy smokes, that is, that's terrifying. But just that, like I said, that ability to go big and small, and every episode had those big and small moments, and it's so well paced.
That is such a fantastic point, because they anchor it. So they're doing an alternative history, but this alternative history is really well anchored in actual events that that really happened, and they keep coming back, and they may play it out slightly different in their version, but they come back to these like points in time throughout the show, and it really anchors it. And like the Jamestown crisis on season 2 that I want to talk about, it brings the world to the brink of nuclear war, and then at the last minute it's actually Danny and the Russian who go through and shake hands, and it causes Reagan's on his plane, and it causes
a little bit to do with it as well.
Yeah. So I just want to. Bill Sozak he remembers the Captain Apollo 10 actually being asked to interview if he would have attempted to land on the moon at Apollo 11. That has come up, and they purposely shorted him on fuel on the ascent module.
Yeah.
On Apollo 10, because they knew those guys were a little cowboyish, and they knew they might attempt it. So by shorting them on fuel on the ascent module, they knew they
could get down.
They could get down, but they couldn't get back up. So knowing that they knew that if you do this, it's a one-way trip. So I just thought, since Bill had mentioned that is a fact that they didn't trust their own astronauts.
It's also amazing if you go on to if you Google For All Mankind and timeline, they actually have all the different world events and what happened in the For All Mankind timeline. And some played out the same way, some played out differently. John Lennon survived the assassination.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
different things. And it all
Margaret
comes
Thatcher
down to
did not.
Margaret Thatcher did not. But
Yeah.
it's amazing how they've plotted this stuff out. And they've gone back and said,
Yes.
the head of the Russian space program had surgery in the early 60s. And their deviation point was he died in real life, and in the For All Mankind universe, he survived. Therefore, he was able to carry on, drive the moon shot for the Russians.
Yeah. The other I think key one in season 2 that we learn is that the shuttle never explodes. At least
they find the problem with the O-rings.
That they caught the problem with the O-rings beforehand, which also sparks another whole storyline, because Margot, who is the NASA chief at the time, she's become friendly with one of the Russian scientists and basically kind of slips that information to him because they were copying our shuttle, which they did do. That is an actual thing, that the Russians actually got blueprints of our shuttle and were building basically the same exact thing.
Yes.
So I don't think.
And Margot, to her credit, she was trying to save lives.
She was doing it right. She wasn't doing it to be treasonous. She was doing it because she said, "Hey, if they, because she somehow saw the version that they had, and it still had the old O-ring specs or something." And she was kind of like, "You might want to recheck these under these conditions," or something. The way she put it, like, kind of thing. Like, didn't really out and out tell them these are gonna cause a problem. So the Challenger explosion never happened. So that, of course, changes things for the shuttle missions. And so there is that whole storyline. We do, again, they carry these characters from each season over and over. Of course, they're getting older and over and over. Margot,
it's 30 years, 30 years of their lives.
Yeah. So it's like basically almost like a decade or decade and a half between jumps.
Yeah. Pretty much.
Margot, though, I want to say is important because she starts out as just a regular engineer, and she was kind of mentored by
von
Braun, who of course we know is all part of Operation Paperclip. And if you know anything about that, you know what I'm talking about. So that kind of, and she once basically realized he was a Nazi, so she broke off his or he worked for the Nazis. I don't want to say that he was one, but so she broke off relations with him, but she eventually became head of NASA, and then things ensue. Because should we tell? I mean, this is a full of spoilers. So the end of season 3, Margot wakes up. Huge plot point. Basically, the Russians find out what she did.
Yeah, Margot's in Russia,
and they basically start blackmailing her for more information that she wouldn't want to give them, which she ends up doing reluctantly, of course. And then the feds start. Actually, it's one of her own engineers that kind of catches on.
Well,
Alita figures it out.
Her what do you call it? Not mentor,
mentee.
But her mentee, yes, prodigy, if you will, or whatever. Kind of discovers that she's the one that leaked this information to the Russians, and then of course she realized she's going to go to jail for a very, very long time. And,
but it's interesting because Margot ends up in Russia,
right?
And her Russian friend ends up in the U.S.
United States. Yeah, kind of a juxtaposition there. So, but Mary Beth really wants to talk about the crisis in season 2 on Jamestown.
It doesn't matter. I just really like Gordo and Tracy running. Like, they wrapped themselves. So what the hell's going on? They had already blown out the window. The Russians came and fired. They fired on Jamestown base and blew out the window to one of the rooms and killed some people that way. And then they entered the base and they were shooting and they shot a nuclear. They shot the controls for the nuclear reactor, which powered the base. And the only way to get the controls was to go outside and come back in. Yes, but it wasn't just the reactor that powered the base. They got that sorted out. It was a secret second reactor that was up there to make weapons that the United States wasn't going to talk about. I think that's what it was.
I don't remember that part. Maybe
I think that's what it was. Anyway, yeah, they shot the
The key is they had to go outside to shut this thing off.
They had to go outside and they did not have spacesuits. They did, however, have duct tape. So I wish Doc Alexander was here to weigh in on this.
I think we have asked Dr. Alexander this, and he kind of made a frowny face.
It's
yeah, oh yeah, very, very bad frowny. Very bad frowny.
So there are some interesting chats on the web about the whole thing from some fairly significant people, and it's really a toss-up whether that would have worked or not. Everybody says, yeah, not. 2 minutes is about your absolute max if it would work at all.
If it would work at all, I think not. They weren't even they weren't careful about did you really look at them? They weren't they were creases at joints that I was like, oh, you can't have any gaps. There were gaps at joints, and I was like, it's not gonna fly. It's just not gonna work.
No, I mean they pretty much knew.
I mean, it did.
Odds
it did. They saved the base. They fixed the reactor and saved the base.
Yeah.
They actually even made it all the way back in, which is the part that killed me. I was like, oh, they made it in. Oh my God.
Yeah, but the damage had been done.
Yeah. Remember, they're astronauts, not scientists.
Yeah, the damage to the blood vessels. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how long he would survive like that. I know he wouldn't die instantly, but because from what I understand, and I wish Doc was here to kind of debunk or whatever, probably tell him I'm not even close, but your blood literally starts to boil because there's no all the gas that's in your blood is held under pressure, and there's no pressure, so it's just like a diver that comes up too fast.
I don't think duct tape
has been down too long.
Nitrogen
in his blood comes up, the pressure's relieved, and it turns and you get basically the bends. So you get a really, 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 really bad case of the bends, and then it's freezing ridiculously cold.
Yeah, but the freezing wouldn't be bothersome because you're in a vacuum and there's nothing to actually conduct the heat off of you. Contact, yeah, that would be bad if you touch the door or something like that. Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know about
just your exposure.
I think you can lose heat even in a vacuum. I think you can.
Like I said, it's there's some really interesting arguments, and I am nowhere near qualified to try and decipher some of the arguments, because every time somebody says that's a good point, and then somebody else comes in and goes, yeah, but that.
Yeah. Right, Dave Bowman did it in 2001. Of course, he was just shot through the door really quick, so he was only exposed for 5 seconds, something like that. So, and even that one was.
Doesn't count.
I mean, like I said, I don't think you don't die instantly, from what I understand.
Well, wasn't there one in the Expanse too?
Oh, the Expanse.
Somebody jump across to another ship in the Expanse too.
What's her name? Naomi did that. She did it. Yeah, she jumped.
Naomi
across.
Did it.
Yeah,
I think.
Of course, they had drugs and stuff. I think I remember.
We've talked about the history and how accurate they are. Oh, maybe.
The Expanse.
Yeah,
they had,
what about the drugs?
They had some drugs. Yeah, you're lagging behind again. They had drugs and stuff, I think, that she took to help.
I quit. I quit. I can't.
Ray Beth has the lagging situation.
Okay, I'm gonna jump it because there's so many great scenes over the 3 series, but one of the ones I loved was the landing, the first person on Mars.
Right. Well, that's when we get to season 3.
We get to season 3, and it's the race to Mars, and the Russians and the Americans get on to Mars first. They're coming down the ramp. They've sort of discussed who's going to, step off first, and basically a fist fight breaks out. And it was
And really, it was stupid because it was the Americans' ship that was the one they landed with. The Russian one was damaged in transit. And I love that.
Yeah, they rescued them.
And that's basically how they found out that Margot was leaking information, because the one engineer could see their engines and their whatever very clearly, and got some of their specs and said, this is our design, that we get. And she's like, how did they get it? And of course, then she started investigating. But there's that one scene where the astronauts on the ship, she's tethered, but the 2 ships are going to collide, and she's like squished, to get crushed between the 2 ships. That was kind of horrible way to go.
That was horrible.
It was,
There's some very cringy scenes.
Love about the whole Mars thing, because they eventually land and they're establishing their base, and now we have this what's the name of the Helios or something? Is that what it is?
Helios, yeah.
Helios is the
Happy Valley.
See it as what? Pick one of these, Blue Origin or the other idiot there.
Yeah. Helios is Blue Origin.
It's basically like
Or
one
SpaceX.
of those, or SpaceX that does their own thing, and then of course the Americans are having problems, and it's like we need help from them and back and forth. But the best part is the Americans would have needed a part to fix the ship or was that after the earthquake thing and the whole collapse? They needed a part for something, a transmitter or something. They needed a part that they didn't have, and they knew that there was a North Korean capsule.
Yeah, that was after the earthquake.
Yeah,
there's a North Korean capsule that had crashed nearby. It was like a day's journey by
a probe.
Yeah, probe or something. So they decided it's got to have, because again, like most things in this world, Taiwan makes all the parts. So they knew it was probably compatible. It was the same part. So they go and get this thing, and lo and behold, it's not a probe. It's a capsule, and there's a guy living in it. The North Koreans actually were the first.
The last survivor, yeah.
They was sitting there alive and living in this thing for God knows how long. Probably.
I didn't notice. Was he growing potatoes?
No.
I don't know how
no room for potatoes.
They did know what he was eating though. I don't remember what it was, because they kept showing him like. I remember he's eating the stuff out of the cans, and he kept throwing them down because the ship it was upside down or something, or on its side. It wasn't landed the way it should have. So
it crashed and killed the rest of the crew. He was
But I suspect that the Korean ship was probably not meant to ever leave. They just wanted to say they got there first, knowing North Korea and how they do. That they're not exactly the nicest country in the world. That's the impression I got. Maybe that's not accurate, but I got the impression that they just went and did it just to get there and didn't really think about bringing them back.
That they were there first.
Just to say they got there.
Yeah, I
first.
had that impression too.
So I don't know if that's.
He had a weapon.
He had a gun. Yeah. So they go, and of course they bring the guy back because they're not going to leave him there. But then they needed to exile.
He was probably relieved.
So
he was probably like, "Ooh, a hot shower and food."
But he wasn't very friendly at first, if I remember. He was kind of adversarial towards them.
Yeah, he kind of wasn't, but in that situation, he was okay. He was not friendly until Ed spoke Korean to him. Then it was okay, right?
Yeah. So some of the things I thought that were ridiculous, particularly in season 3, the fact that the one kid there, Danny Stevens, who's played by Casey Johnson, he's the son of
Gordo and Tracy.
Of Gordo and Tracy. He had a drug problem, for one thing. Plus, he
developed a drug problem.
Well, yeah, and he had slept with Ed Baldwin's wife. So there's that weird.
It doesn't matter. She's dead now. So I mean, hey.
Well, she does die, But anyway, so the thing is, we know that it's a known fact to everybody that this kid has issues, and
they still let him. Yeah, he had issues before he went.
They send him on this mission anyway. So I'm thinking it probably, really wasn't a brilliant idea why they would send somebody with all kinds of already pre-existing problems in a situation that probably was going to be very high stress. And of course, he does do these because he's holding a candle for Baldwin's wife. He wants Ed out of the way.
Yeah,
that's kind of why that's why he's like trying to kill him.
Yeah, but I mean, you've got to look at this, and again, they take the long view on this show so often, and I mean, he did save the Space Hotel, which became the Helios's ship to go to Mars.
He did save the Space Hotel,
and Ed has always had a thing for the hard luck cases. He got Gordo back to flying status, even though Gordo had obvious issues. That's
another thing. Gordo never should have gone back either.
He just believes in people. I
know, but I'm just thinking from a reality standpoint. It's one thing to say Ed is gonna want some along, but the all powers of you would be effing no way. You know what I'm saying? There's no way we're gonna put somebody that's already.
It's not just Ed making this decision. The entire team at
So,
back on Earth
so
should have
that
been
was-
like,
so that
no.
was one thing that I had. I'm like, this is a little bit suspension of disbelief at this
One
point.
thing.
The
Talk
other
about,
one was the
how about
pregnancy.
strapping Kelly? Yeah, her getting pregnant and then strapping her to the top of the thing and just
Yeah, I mean,
launching her.
the whole pregnancy thing is
Who
killing
agrees
me. I'm
to
like,
that?
you cannot tell me that nobody had any birth control. Like, I mean, this is not a situation where you want to have somebody pregnant. I mean, it's just not a. We don't. There's no idea what low gravity would even do to a developing fetus.
Also, well, that's true. Well, but it would have been a great science experiment. But the Russians were like, she may be a threat. Why? What? How? How is she a threat? A threat to what exactly?
I don't know. I miss
You
what
don't remember that part.
they're saying the daughter was a threat.
The Russians knew she was pregnant before she did because they did her blood for. What were they doing? They were working because the guy was the doctor, and he was doing I don't know what. He knew she was pregnant before she did, and he's talking to the other Russian.
Yeah, I don't know. I must have missed that. I don't know why they would have thought she was a threat, but clearly they had to get her off Mars, so they rigged up this insane launch thing.
Insane plan to get her off.
To basically launch her into space, and then she has to kind of do this Hail Mary
jetpack
to catch the spaceship as it orbits
up to the Helios.
So yeah, it was very bizarre.
That, and they also banished Danny. Oh, Danny did get his comeuppance, by the way. Also, just so you guys know, there are two Dannys: the good Danny that we love, and the bad Danny who got banished to the North Korean capsule. Go live in that capsule away from us. But oops, the gun was buried out there too. So I think that's going to play next season.
Right. They figured out that Danny Stevens, was the one that caused the drilling accident that caused the big avalanche or whatever on Mars. So they basically say, okay, and this is when Ed finally has had enough, and he's like, yeah, you're going to go live in the Korean spaceship by yourself. Yeah. It's like, that's like space jail. The other
Danny is, space jail. The other Danny is Danielle Poole, and she is easily my favorite character on the show. I love her.
Yeah, she's a good character.
I like Molly too.
Yes, Molly was huge.
Molly was huge. Molly and again, that was during that first season when they were basically coming up with this female astronaut corps. She was obviously, very key to that. And then she basically becomes she takes over for Ed for head astronaut, or I forgot what the actual position is. But she gets the one to decide who goes on the mission. And who doesn't.
The director, flight director, not flight director, crew director, something like that.
I don't know what exactly.
Director of astronauts, I think it was.
Yeah, so she basically did the flight rotation. Some of the cool things that we didn't mention was like how what was his name died, the real mission control.
Oh, Deke Slayton. They decided to kill Deke on the moon.
Deke Slayton, but the other one, is it Cernan? No.
Gene
Kranz.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, Gene Kranz was standing next to the launch to a rocket, and they were doing some engine tests, and he was nearby.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
it's like boom, he's dead, gone. So obviously Gene Kranz is still alive.
Like that all of a sudden.
Gene Kranz is still alive and with us. So, but clearly in that, and then it was the one guy that died on the other mission where the rocket was going out of control. That was. Was that Gene? No, was that Gene Cernan? No. I gotta look it up. It was the one astronaut.
The other thing, guys, that we.
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna move on. What was his name?
I'm gonna look it up. So I was to say, move on while I'm looking it up. You look
it up. They had Sally Ride. Sally Ride was there when they were going to shoot down the Sea Dragon. Not the Sea Dragon. Sorry. The Sea Dragon is what launched it. I don't remember what the name of the actual.
You mean the Russian
Sally
one?
Ride. They worked them all in. But while Rizzo's looking at that, there's something else I've got to point out.
I think it was Deke Slayton.
Yeah, Deke died on the moon. They buried him on the moon after she revealed after what's her name, who I can't think of her name.
Right.
She
revealed she was a lesbian. The real Deke Slayton was one of the original 6 or whatever it was at Mercury astronauts. And then they found out he he had something wrong with his heart. He had a heart murmur or something. So he became just grounded. But he did eventually get on Apollo 17 or something like that.
Yeah, he did go up for something. He
Yeah,
went up with a
he
cosmonaut. There's
finally
a shot
got-
of
he
him
got
with a
flight
cosmonaut.
status again. Yeah, they did give him flight status again in real life, and he did get up on the
That's cool.
Did
The other
Apollo
thing,
1
guys, that
burn?
we-
Yeah, I think it did, Bill. I think they did do the Apollo 1 fire.
Yeah, maybe they
Yes,
did.
Gus died. Yes.
Yep. Yeah, they did
Yeah,
do
Gus-
that. Yep.
Gus-
They did
yeah.
Apollo Soyuz too, Jeff. Yep.
Yeah.
That was the thing with which they were kind of like, that was during the moon crisis, remember?
Yep.
That's what you were talking about.
That's right. It was.
There's so much tension, and they were still going to go with ahead with Apollo Soyuz.
Yeah, because that was Danielle doing that. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
The other thing, guys, we absolutely have to, we'd be remiss if we didn't touch on this, is that they're so accurate with their history, but they're also incredibly accurate with their NASA, with everything, with every single thing they do. Science wise, the actual science of being in space is pretty accurate. There's actually Apple TV produces these really short little 3-minute explanations of the science of the episode. So like whatever the episode where the hotel started spinning too fast and made it too much gravity, they did a little 3-minute explanation of how that works. They did a little 3-minute explanation of space sails, the sails that took the NASA ship to Mars and how that would work. It's hosted by Ren Schmidt, who plays Margot. And Ren, in interviews, has I've noticed that she especially always mentions a bunch of the guys from NASA who have been advising them on the show, and she always mentions Mike and Denise Okuda. She says they are incredible. She says they are NASA freaks and they know every single last detail. And if you need to know anything, you just go ask them. And I just thought it was so important for us to mention that, because we knew Mike and Denise were working on it, but and I knew Mike had designed for it. But yeah, the cast and the crew, I think, really rely on them to help get certain things right.
Mike was very, very involved in the Apollo era mission control rebuild, where they restored it back to original. Everything works. All the CRTs work. Mike was very instrumental in all that. So he is a font of huge NASA knowledge when it comes to stuff like that. So yeah, that they are basically like advisors on this show, and thank God, because again, seems like everything they touch turns out to be gold.
Yeah, I mean, it's just everything has a plan to it. It's amazing. The timeline has a plan. The science, why the science went in a certain direction, leads to the timeline. What happened in politics, because who actually was president at the time, and
it's important
causes certain things to happen. Yes,
it's important to note that the Soviet Union is now well into the 90s. It did not collapse in the late 80s like it did in real life, so we still have an active Soviet Union. I don't know how they explain that, because I think a lot of it collapsed because of they were broke. I mean, as a country, they were running out of money.
We'll see where they take it. I'll be curious.
One of the things was that they did develop nuclear fusion, which changed the economies, and that
might have been it. Yeah, that would have done it, because they were spending. I mean, in real life, they were spending so much money on their war machine.
Yeah.
The rest of it was cool.
The other thing that this show makes a point to say that changed was we escape global. No, we don't escape global warming, but we don't have the massive climate change that we have. Because they did change their power sources.
Yeah, because of the fusion. Because they found that clean energy.
Yeah.
The one thing I think I was going to say that we were talking about it briefly was the Sea Dragon. They really didn't, because at the end of season 1. That was the little after the credits.
Yeah, they launched the Sea Dragon.
Launch the Sea Dragon. But then they launched the Sea Dragon in season 2.
I thought that was going to be a lot bigger with it, and maybe it was season, but it turned out to be that's just how they got cargo. It was like a big cargo.
Yeah, it was just a big cargo thing.
Military stuff on there too, but for the most part, it really wasn't anything that clandestine and why they launched it.
Yeah,
I guess the only reason they launched it from underwater was to keep it more
nuclear.
Yeah,
it was nuclear, but it may have been carrying nuclear components, because remember, after the crisis at Jamestown, The Russians tried to blockade the moon so that we couldn't get our supplies, and our supplies were in that Sea Dragon. It wasn't called the Sea Dragon. It was, I don't know what it was called, but there were, I think, nuclear components for weapons in there or something. Because, and then Ed decides to blow it up. Remember, there's that whole standoff in space, and Sally Ride.
Yeah.
Ed said, "We're gonna shoot the Russians," and Sally Ride was like, "No, you're not." That scene.
Yeah. So there was Marines actually on the moon. So we get to that point.
Oh yeah, that's right. We put Marines on the moon. Oh, that's right. And Tracy, they flew that clandestine thing. They flew.
Yeah, it was
valley.
basically a lunar lander, a bigger size lunar lander that was designed to. It was kind of like this
because they were going to go retake base 356.
Yeah, it was like the moon bus from 2001. It was the way they got around on the moon fast.
And they were riding on the outside. Remember, the Marines were just hanging on the outside. AC and some other guy were flying them. Yeah, that was,
it would make sense because as long as you were strapped to it, it really wouldn't make any difference whether you were inside or out, because there's no air resistance to worry about getting blown or. You know what I'm saying? It's might as well. I mean, it's not really no much advantage to being inside or outside.
Inside,
so,
except
you're attached somehow. So, but yeah, it was just interesting.
If you crash or if Tracy scrapes the wall of the canyon.
Yeah. So, so it was a good. Then we didn't even talk about the whole storyline of what was happening on Earth with the kids. Like I said, that whole backstory with the one son who kind of got caught up with the terrorists. And
what purpose did that serve besides just to kill off Karen? I don't.
You'll see it come to fruition because you look at this show and each season jumps 10 years. So the annoying kids in the background in season 1 all of a sudden are one gets killed in season 2, and then season 3, the other one becomes an astronaut. So you see them develop over time. The immigrant from the illegal immigrant from Mexico, becomes a whiz in science, becomes a NASA flight director, and told the sweet
Margot basically. Yeah.
So you look at these, and maybe this season it didn't make any sense, but in season 4 we'll find out. They talk about this being a 6 to 7 year arc that they want to do, and they're hoping to get all of that. They have not had a clearance for 5 yet, unlike 4, which I think was greenlit before 3 came out. But it is still an incredibly popular show, and it's a show that is sort of raised up as this is what we can do in a streaming service.
Yeah, it's like I said. In the when I initially posted this, I said this is probably one of the best shows. I wouldn't even say science fiction shows. It's one of the best shows, period, on modern stuff that's out there. It's just compelling on so many levels. Like I said, I was so happily surprised when I watched the first couple episodes. It just drew you right in. When I was kind of skeptical at first about the storyline, I was a little.
The one thing I would say is you probably can't come in, or you won't get as rich of an experience if you come in at the beginning of any of the subsequent seasons. You really need to see it from the beginning and watch these characters grow to really understand them.
And like you said, Bruce, this whole giant arc that they're building, and as much as we're kind of sick of story arcs, this is one that is necessary because of
huge
how
one. This is massive.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like Babylon 5, where they did the 5, 6 seasons, and that was the whole arc. Remember, that was the whole. They figured out where they were going from season 1. They knew where they were going to end up. So I think that's what this is. They know where they're going with it. Where it ends, who knows? Let's hope Apple's smart enough to keep this train running, because, with competitiveness and streaming services, they really need to keep their, and I think, like I said, I think Apple has some good stuff. I think if you're going to pay for one, it's not a bad one to pay for.
Yeah, we don't know where this will end, but I have got to point out that in my travels, as I got ready for this episode tonight, so many people, and I said this in my teaser that I put up 15 minutes before the show, so many people were like, oh, it's the Star Trek prequel that we never knew we needed. And it kind of is. It does actually follow a lot of Star Trek values. in the crisis, in the crutch of things. So we've got the Russians and the Americans and the Helios, the independents, kind of all fighting for things. But when there's a crisis, they come together and work it out. Ron Moore could have only learned this from his time on Star Trek. And so many people are like, this, we could easily see this development, this space race easily developing into, next thing you know, we've got the Enterprise and we've got, we're out there and we're doing stuff, or the Vulcans come like they do in the movie. The Vulcans come, or whatever. If he had just worked some eugenics into the 90s, it would have been the Star Trek prequel.
Yeah, maybe. I mean,
I'm not fully convinced because
I'm not sure I'm convinced there either.
I find that there's a give and take to this show. I find that there's very much a give and take to this show. With women's rights, with gender equality, because of the Russian cosmonaut, female cosmonaut on the moon, America goes forward, passes the Equal Rights Amendment. There's a woman president in the 90s.
Who's gay?
But
who's gay?
Their acceptance of the the gay and lesbian societies a little bit.
Yeah, that's still struggling.
That actually is oddly behind.
Remember, there's still when we saw this last episode, it's still the 90s, so they were not that far. I think they were kind of on par with the 90s. You were starting to see some of that crack, people coming out, saying that. So I think I bet you by the time we see this season, we'll be more on par with that politically as far as where we're at.
I think it would be too easy to
dogs because I suppose that's true.
I think it would just be too easy to say, hey, everything's rosy if we kept the space race going and stuff like that.
Yeah, they want to keep it
and I think
very real.
You look at though in reality though, we're talking about the Russians and the Americans, of course, with all the tensions that we've had over the years, we still had a very good relationship with them. Look at it, for the longest time in the shuttle program, we were sending them, we were paying. But we were sending our astronauts to Kazakhstan to be launched to the International Space Station.
We still have an excellent relationship.
Well, I mean, we're now getting SpaceX and stuff to take them now, but for the most part, again, it goes back to Apollo Soyuz. We started that, that kind of that, in space where we're ignoring this crap that's going on down on the planet. So that's why I think it wasn't kind of a pre-Star Trek. I don't know. I think they were just following along.
I think it is. So many people are saying it's the Star Trek prequel, and I buy into it. I think it is. Dogs are reminding me. Did you guys catch that conversation between Danielle Poole and one of the Russians about Laika, that dog they sent into space?
Oh, the one that
it's just one of these little moments in this show that the writing is just fantastic. It was just so fantastic. It really kind of reframed the whole Laika thing for me because I just was on, oh my God, that poor dog. Right. And Danielle was like, she did her job. She did her job. I was like, oh my God. It's just so many moments. And just the development of the character and the depth of the character and the depth of the writing on the show. It's just phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal.
No, it's
and the balance of it, because every episode has a lot of talking, and some people might get turned off by all the talking that happens. But there's always a physical scene or issue that has to be resolved, and it's such a perfect balance,
But then they do the tension very well when they do have these action scenes, if you want to call them. The tension is done so well that you are on the kind of like, oh my God, what's going to happen?
Oh God, yeah. That crisis at Jamestown, I was holding my breath.
It's not where you think. They do tend to not trick you, but give you that twist that you didn't see that coming.
I think even if you watch the first episode, even if you know what the show's about, you sit there and you're going along and going, yeah, okay, it's the moon landing, and the reveal of red moon, Soviets land on the moon. Yeah, Mike, you said it gut punches you. You sort of go, hold on a second, that's not right. And it's what they continuously do. There's the scene where there is a major accident with the women astronauts. You have no clue who the heck has been killed, and and it's a reveal, just like in real life. Something's happened. Who's it affected? And you find out, and it's done so well.
Yep. Well, it is 8:00, and I think we covered this show pretty well. Just so we can cover what does Roy?
Phil and
Sorry,
Roy.
Bruce. I don't know what you have. I don't know what you got going on the rest of the week, Bruce. Really not interested at this point.
Roy
thanks.
is going to be talking to
I got my
his
COVID
friend-
shot coming up.
Well, we all have Shatner coming up, so I guess that counts.
Yeah.
Roy will be
Right.
talking to his friend Jeffrey Morris about his new piece Persephone, and Phil is actually his Thursdays are preempted until December by the students of the university where his radio station is. Who would have thought the kids would want to be on the air, but they do. So he is preempted. He still has Friday Night Freeform, so he'll still be doing stuff for that. Are we off next week, Rizzo? Are you actually in Ticonderoga on?
Yeah,
next
I
Wednesday?
am. So we'll probably, that's right. I forgot about that. You're right. It's a good
Probably
point.
off,
We
unless you
will
want to
not have
broadcast
show
from Ticonderoga.
Yeah, I'm going up because we have lots of lighting and stuff to do. We're getting the new auxiliary control up and running and some other fun stuff. So if you're coming up for Shatner, you're going to see that. So yeah, I'll be up there a day or a few days early to work on that. So yeah, so no show
I will
next
see
week,
you
guys.
on Thursday.
Yeah.
Bruce, when are you getting there?
Late Thursday.
Late Thursday. Okay. So hopefully everybody watching will see some of you up there.
Yep.
Chris says, see you in, I think he means Thai. Oh, you're going to be on, wow. Bill Sotak will be there. Excellent, excellent. Can't wait to see all of you guys.
Yep. So until then, or until 2 weeks from tonight when we're back, we will have a live long and prosper. What else can I say? Good night, folks. Thanks, Bruce. Thanks, Mary Beth, once again.
This show, it's so awesome.
Yeah, go watch it. Good night.
Yes, watch the show.